Okay, so today we're going to try something a little different, a little bit of a thought experiment. Let's say we have the chance to sit down with a philosopher king,
Oh, wow.
right? Someone known for their wisdom and just rule.
Yeah.
And we get to share some really foundational wisdom. Like, imagine if we could distill some key knowledge from a source like the Quran, the central text of Islam.
Okay, I like this already. So we're talking about taking these big ideas about governance, justice, the nature of divinity, things a philosopher king would really grapple with.
Exactly. And presenting those in a way that's clear and relevant. Luckily, we have some great material to work with.
Yeah. What are we looking at today?
We've got selections from the Quran itself. Those are the verses called ayat, covering a pretty wide range of topics.
Right, I remember that term.
We've also got hadith, those narrations attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, which can give us more context.
Helpful for understanding the finer points.
And of course, gotta love those translators' notes. They point out all the nuances of the original Arabic that might be lost in translation.
Crucial for really getting the depth of the meaning.
So our mission is to take all this and pull out the insights that would really hit home for our philosopher king, the core truths that would inform their rule.
Fascinating challenge. Let's dive in.
Let's do it. And what better place to start than with the very beginning? The opening chapter of the Quran, Surah Fatiha, starts with praise to Allah, Lord of the worlds. So right away, we have this idea of ultimate sovereignty, right? Allah as the creator of everything.
Right out the gate, setting the stage.
But then I love how it immediately goes on to list divine attributes, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful, and then sovereign of the day of recompense. So we have ultimate power, but also this profound compassion and this unwavering sense of justice. I feel like that's something a ruler would really ponder.
Oh, absolutely. That balance is so crucial, isn't it? And actually, there's a fascinating point the translator makes about those terms for merciful, Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. You know, when they appear together, it's not just repetition.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it suggests maybe two distinct aspects of mercy. Ar-Rahman could be this universal, all-encompassing benevolence, while Ar-Rahim is maybe more specific, you know, like a deeper mercy for those who strive to be righteous.
Okay, so universal versus a more focused kind of mercy.
Right. I think a philosopher king would be really intrigued by that. How do you embody both of those as a ruler? It's a tough question.
For sure. And speaking of rulers, there's a passage in Surah Baqarah that I think about a lot. It's where Allah tells the angels about creating a successive authority on earth. Adam, right? The Khalifa.
Ah, yes. That concept of stewardship.
Yeah.
Humans as caretakers of the world.
Exactly. But the fascinating part is that the angels actually question this decision.
Yeah.
They say something like, will you place upon it one who causes corruption and sheds blood? You know, even the angels, these pure beings, seem to foresee the potential problems with human rule.
It's almost like they're anticipating all the challenges a philosopher king would face.
Totally.
Yeah.
But Allah responds with, indeed, I know that which you do not know. Like there's a divine wisdom at play, a bigger picture that we don't necessarily grasp.
Trusting the plan even when we don't see it.
And right after that, we get the story of Allah teaching Adam the names. Now, what do you make of that? Especially when we're thinking about a philosopher king.
Well, I think a lot of scholars interpret that as the bestowing of knowledge, right? It's what makes humans unique.
It's like the tool that equips them for their role.
Precisely. So it's this ability to understand, to categorize, to engage with the created world intellectually. For a philosopher king, that's huge.
It's almost like a divine mandate to use your brain.
Yeah, like wisdom and knowledge aren't just nice extras. They're essential for fulfilling your duties as a ruler.
Interesting. Now, shifting gears a bit to the more practical aspects of justice and governance.
Okay.
We see in these excerpts a really strong emphasis on establishing prayer, salat, and giving charity, zakat. Those were presented as like the bedrock.
The two pillars,
Yep.
yeah.
And I think what's really insightful, especially for a ruler, is how these two are tied together. So you have salat, which is this personal connection with the divine, cultivating inner discipline and spirituality.
All right, that inward focus.
And then zakat, which is this outward action, taking care of those in need, redistributing wealth to create a just society.
The balance again.
Exactly. So it's like true piety, and by extension, a just society, requires both. You need that inner virtue and that outward concern for others.
I can definitely see a philosopher king taking notes on that one.
Totally. And there's one verse that I feel like is spoken directly to leaders. It says, do you order righteousness of the people and forget yourselves while you recite the scripture? Then will you not reason?
Ooh, that's a powerful one. Calling out hypocrisy.
Big time. It's like You can't demand something of others that you're not willing to do yourself.
Leading by example is so crucial,
It really is. That verse is a good reminder to check yourself, make sure your actions line up with your words.
especially when you're in a position of authority.
Yeah. And along those lines, we also come across the advice to seek help through patience and prayer. I feel like that's especially relevant for leaders who are facing tough decisions and challenges.
It's a good reminder that even the most powerful people need support, and not just any support, right? Patience, that steadfastness in the face of difficulty.
Inner strength, resilience.
And then prayer, connecting with a source of wisdom beyond yourself. That combination, I think, would be really appealing to a philosopher king.
Yeah. Because even in the midst of chaos, you need that grounding, that connection to something bigger.
Right. Now, one principle that I think stands out, particularly for a ruler, is the declaration that there shall be no compulsion in religion.
Freedom of belief.
Yes, it establishes this idea that faith is a personal choice, not something to be forced on anyone. And in a diverse society, that's absolutely essential.
About respecting individual conscience.
Exactly. And that respect, I think, would be something a just ruler would prioritize.
Now, there's a passage that talks about the importance of judging with justice. It says, "Indeed, we have revealed to you the book in truth, so you may judge between the people by that which Allah has shown you."
So it's emphasizing a framework for justice that's based on something beyond human whim, a higher ethical standard.
Yeah, it's not about personal bias. It's about aligning with this revealed truth.
And then it goes on to warn against following personal inclinations or the desires of those who don't know. Like, don't let yourself be swayed by what's popular. Stick to what's right.
Interesting. And then that idea of impartiality comes up again when it talks about being truthful in speech, especially when you're making judgments. It says, when you speak, be just, even if it concerns a near relative, and the covenant of Allah fulfill.
So even family ties shouldn't interfere with justice. And honoring agreements is paramount.
Which makes sense if you're building a society based on trust.
Right. A ruler needs to be seen as trustworthy, as someone who keeps their word.
And then we get to this really strong condemnation of causing corruption. The verse says, "And when he goes away, he strives throughout the land to cause corruption therein and destroy crops and animals. And Allah does not like corruption." It's pretty clear how strongly that's viewed.
No mincing words there. And it's interesting because it goes beyond just human corruption, right? It's about the environment, the resources of the land.
Yeah, like a holistic view of what it means to be a good steward.
And for a philosopher king thinking long term, that's vital. You're not just responsible for the people, you're responsible for the whole system.
Now, when it comes to human conduct, I noticed a recurring theme of contrasting outward appearances with inner intentions.
Yes. Like that passage where it talks about those whose speech pleases you in worldly life, yet he is the fiercest of opponents, versus those who sell himself, seeking means to the approval of Allah.
The difference between seeking worldly praise and seeking divine approval.
It's like, are you doing things for show, or are you doing things from a place of genuine sincerity?
A philosopher king would definitely need to be able to make that distinction.
Yeah, being able to see through facades, discerning true character, that's essential for a good leader.
And then we have this idea of striving in the cause of Allah with your wealth and your life. The idea that there's a reward for that effort.
So it's about dedication to a higher purpose, putting something above your own self-interest.
And whether that's through material support or personal sacrifice, it's seen as valuable.
Yeah. A philosopher king might think about how to inspire that kind of dedication in others. How do you motivate people to work for the greater good?
Interesting question. And then on the flip side, we have the warnings against hypocrisy, saying you believe one thing but doing another.
Right, that disconnect between words and actions. The excerpts are pretty clear that hypocrisy is a big deal.
It erodes trust, which is essential for a strong community.
Absolutely. And then there are the consequences for those who persist in disbelief. Like, there's a strong message there about the seriousness of making choices aligned with truth.
Now, I think the concept of accountability on the day of resurrection would be a powerful one for our philosopher king to consider. The idea that all deeds will be judged.
Yeah, that ultimate reckoning. It's not just about earthly justice. It's about something bigger.
And it even mentions that the Quran itself will intercede for those who recite it. And certain chapters, like Al-Baqarah and Ali Imran, are highlighted.
So engagement with the divine word is seen as something that can help on that final day.
It's like seeking mercy through study and understanding.
Which I think fits well with the idea of a philosopher king, someone who values wisdom and knowledge.
For sure. And then we get to a really key point theologically. The idea that Allah does not forgive associating partners with him, shirk, but may forgive lesser sins.
Yeah, that's a fundamental concept. Shirk is seen as the ultimate transgression.
And from a philosophical perspective, you could see it as denying the oneness of reality.
Right. But the fact that other sins can be forgiven emphasizes the vastness of divine mercy.
So it's like, even with this firm line, there's still room for compassion and forgiveness.
Which I think is a really important point, especially when we're talking about justice and governance.
There's also this idea that individuals are tested with both good and evil. It says, and we test you with evil, and with good as trial, and to us you will be returned.
That's an interesting way of looking at things. It's not just good luck or bad luck. It's all part of a divine plan.
Yeah, and every experience, whether positive or negative, is an opportunity to grow.
And to show your true character, a philosopher king could definitely learn something from that.
And lastly, when it comes to human conduct, the excerpts really stress honoring your parents and treating them well.
Basic respect as the foundation.
And then there's a strict prohibition against killing, except by legal right. Intentional killing is condemned outright.
These are pretty universal ethical principles.
They are, and they would be essential for any ruler trying to build a stable and just society.
Now, shifting gears to the role of messengers and divine guidance, the excerpts introduce Prophet Muhammad as a bringer of good tidings and a warner.
And the Quran is presented as this clear guide, a source of wisdom.
So we have the messenger and the message is basically, hey, here's the path to truth and righteousness.
And for a philosopher king who's always seeking knowledge and guidance, that would be significant.
Yeah. It raises questions about the nature of revelation, the sources of authority. Those are big philosophical questions.
Definitely. And it's not just about Muhammad. The excerpts also talk about the trials faced by previous prophets, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and how people responded to them, which wasn't always well.
It shows this recurring pattern throughout history. Whenever you have someone coming with a profound message, there's going to be pushback.
So a ruler might learn something from those stories. How do you deal with resistance when you're trying to do what's right?
How do you convince people? How do you navigate those challenges?
Big questions. And then the concept of divine trials comes up again. The idea that Allah might purify believers through these trials.
Like hardship can actually make you stronger in your faith.
Yeah, it refines your character, tests your resilience.
Yeah. And then there's this line that the religion in the sight of Allah is Islam, meaning submission to God.
And the encouragement to invite others to this path, but with wisdom and good instruction.
So it's not about forcing people, it's about persuasion, reason.
Which I think a philosopher king would appreciate. The power of a well-reasoned argument.
Exactly. Now let's talk about the material world and the hereafter. The excerpts describe this life as fleeting enjoyment compared to the eternal rewards of paradise.
Yeah, like this world is temporary, but the next one is forever.
It puts things into perspective, doesn't it? It's a reminder that ultimately material possessions and worldly pleasures are not the end goal.
And paradise is described as this amazing place with gardens and rivers, purified companions.
And most importantly, the approval of Allah. It's like the ultimate state of fulfillment.
And of course, there's hellfire for those who reject faith and do evil. The idea of lasting punishment.
So there are consequences for your actions, even beyond this life.
That accountability is a pretty powerful motivator.
It is. And then the concept of resurrection and the day of judgment is presented as something inevitable, not just a possibility.
Like there's no escaping that final accounting.
And that belief, I think, forms a really strong foundation for ethical conduct.
So, wow, we've covered a lot of ground here. If we were to sum it up for our philosopher king, what do you think would be the most impactful takeaways?
Well, I think the concept of Allah's absolute sovereignty, but also his immense mercy, would be really striking. It sets the stage for how a ruler should approach their own authority.
Right. Power with compassion.
Exactly. And then the emphasis on justice and integrity in governance. That's a core principle that resonates across the board.
It's like the bedrock of a just society.
And then the importance of ethical conduct, both in terms of outward actions and inner intentions, and that those actions have consequences.
Accountability is key.
Absolutely. And then the idea of divine guidance through revelation and reason as the ultimate source of wisdom.
Like seek out knowledge from the highest source.
Yeah. Those are all themes that I think a philosopher king would really grapple with.
So to wrap things up, what's a question that we could leave our listeners, especially those rulers out there, to ponder?
How about this? How do you actually put these principles into practice? How do you take the ideas of divine sovereignty, mercy, justice, ethical conduct, revealed guidance, and translate them into real-world policies and decisions? How do you govern with wisdom in a world that's complex and constantly changing?
That's a great one. It really gets to the heart of what it means to be a just and effective leader.
Because it's one thing to understand these principles, but putting them into action, that's the real challenge.
And that's a challenge that every ruler faces, whether they're drawing from the Quran or from any other source of wisdom.
It's a lifelong journey.
It is. Well, this has been a fascinating exploration. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
Clearly, the Quran offers a lot to think about, not just for those in positions of power, but for all of us.
Timeless wisdom.
It really is. So until next time, keep seeking that knowledge, keep asking those tough questions, and keep striving to make the world a little bit better.